Hello, everyone. I can just see a few people coming into the webinar. We'll just give it a minute or two before we kick off, just to make sure most people are here. Just bear with us for another minute or so. See the numbers steadily climbing, which is great.
It's always lovely if people want to introduce themselves in the chat box. Might be some familiar faces in there, I'm guessing, coming in.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'll just give it one more minute. I think we're at 2 minutes past, so we'll probably
you on the list there.
Let's kick off. I'm just going to do a quick intro, and then we will get into the webinar. So thank you everyone for joining us today. It's great to see it's great to see lots of attendees and lots of signups, which is brilliant. Obviously hopefully there's something interesting we can share with you. I'm Dave. I'm the MD of White Bear. We're a brand and packaging agency based in London and Dublin, and we work with a lot of consumer brands and a lot of brands in the food and drink space, in particular challengers and disruptor brands that are looking to shake up their category, do something a little bit different, bring new products to life and innovate. And that's why we thought today would be a really good opportunity to co-host an event with HRA Global, the research consultancy, and an opportunity for them to talk about some of the food trends they're seeing through their research, and for us to then provide the thread from research into what that potentially means for your brand and how your brand can adapt and take advantage of the ongoing and upcoming trends. So we've two speakers today. We have Hamish Renton, the MD of HRA, and his colleague Roz will introduce him much better than I, so I'll leave that to her in a minute. And then Kelly McKenzie, our founder and creative director, and she's going to talk after Hamish to sort of add some colour to some of the food trends. They'll both talk for about 20 minutes each, and then we'll finish with some competitions and Q&A. But I think I'll stop talking now, and I'll hand over to Roz to really get into it and introduce us to Hamish. So thanks again.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dave. And good afternoon, everyone. So yes, I'm Roz Algar, work alongside Hamish at HRA. I'm the Client Services Director. So alongside White Bear today, we just wanted to really spend some time looking at both global trends as well as trends in the UK, how this will impact consumer behaviour, purchasing habits, and kind of what brands need to do to remain relevant, stay ahead of the competition. So as Dave said, a couple of speakers, 20 minutes each or so, and then plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So as I'm sure everyone's familiar with this structure now, there's a Q&A tab. Please click on that, ask your questions, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. And if we don't answer your question, I think everyone who's on the call will probably do a kind of bit of a feedback and kind of cover the Q&A within that as well. So I'm not going to spend any more time because it's not about me. Quick about us. So HRA, hopefully some of you know of us, and if you don't, just really quickly. So we're food and drink specialists. We provide consultancy services to the food and drink industry. Over 25 years of knowledge, retail, food and drink, manufacturing. We're incredibly well networked through the whole kind of food supply chain, and so can kind of add value and insight and input at all stages of a kind of process. We provide expertise, holistic thinking, all the way through the value chain. As I said, we provide market research and consumer insight. We do strategic consultancy and commercial consultancy, supporting businesses really bring their products to market. And we've actually delivered for over 200 clients in over 20 countries. We truly are a kind of a global organization. A lot of kind of import work into the UK, so working with brands from around the world, and also helping brands from the UK export to the EU and beyond. And one other area from me, just which might be interesting, and it will come up at the end in terms of just an offer that we might have for people, is we actually run our own consumer insights panel as well, called the Taste Collective. Over 3,500 willing consumers at our fingertips, so we can run qual and quant projects with them really quickly and kind of get insights back very, very quickly. But enough about that. I'm going to hand over to Hamish now, who's going to do the meat of the journey here.
Thank you, Roz.
Just a note, Roz, sorry, someone in the questions just mentioned they couldn't see you on the screen. So let's just make sure we can see Hamish now. If everyone can see Hamish when you're speaking.
Can everyone see Hamish?
Yeah.
I mean, I can.
I can.
I can.
I guess
Great.
just
So
let us know in the Q&A if you can't.
If you can't,
Okay.
let me know. Great. Well, look, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for tuning in, whether you're watching this live or on catch up. I'm just going to start at the top with the global trends, because if you like, there's a process of winnowing that happens in food and drink, and you can't ignore, if you like, the planetary picture about what's happening. So let's start there, shall we? So the big three for me of all the trends, really, if you look at what's kind of the hottest trends and where, if you like, the energy of the global food and drink industry is in personalized nutrition, convenience, and if you like, a bubble of work around transparency and authenticity. So in personalized nutrition, this has gone from being a pipe dream, effectively, that futurists would have predicted this 10, 15 years ago, to being a reality today. You get bombarded, if you're on Instagram, with companies saying, I can create a vitamin pill or a stack of vitamins, minerals, nootropics just for you. You answer a short quiz, and then through the post will come 30 pills to you. So we already have personalized nutrition, and it's going now at scale. So effectively, food and drink experiences that are tailored to the individual. You might be lactose intolerant and a pescatarian with a preference for dark chocolate. That's very doable, and that's very deliverable by the global food industry now. And I think you look at how that's coming through and how that's flowing through onto the retail shelves and the outlets that we shop at. If you look at, say, meal kits, they're getting curated and they're being, put together to address that trend. Retailers have been at it for a while through loyalty schemes, shaping offerings, shaping discounts to tempt you to up your repertoire of ranges, to deepen the amount that you buy of a particular category, or increase the trip spend or the frequency that you purchase. But this is now getting mirrored, if you like, from the brand side. On-demand food delivery as well. I mean, that's another obvious way that you can deliver with a specific dietary need, and it can be delivered to you. And of course, food products have been tailored for a long time. You think about sort of nut-free, or you think about free from, and some of the other areas as well. So this is with us now, and this is being amped up and really going mainstream. I see this in almost every category at the moment. So that's personalized nutrition. Convenience is a meta trend. So I mean, I feel like I've been talking about this for 20 years, in the sense that we have busy lifestyles, we're busier than ever, we've got changing eating habits, we're on the go. We really want grab and go and portable snacks, and you can think about the way that you eat. So the environment, driving a car, for instance, or being on a train, are very different occasions in a way, in terms of what goes, how you consume, whether the eating occasion itself differs. So, again, if you think about kind of mobile ordering apps, and you think about, the evolution of the store format, hot, cold, different regimes of temperature, they all play into that. And then lastly, authenticity and transparency. There is this desire to know where stuff comes from, and that, that flows all the way through to sort of clean ingredient lists, or being able to snap a barcode and see which trawler in which ocean your fish is from. And also there's an expectation of ethical sourcing, but again, going sort of above those ethics as well is rewarded in many instances. So
Hamish, I'm going to stop you for a second, because you're using my microphone. I think you're not being seen on the screen. Okay. So I'm going to pass over.
Fine.
Assume that's
and then
Hamish.
So again, they're the three sort of meta trends, and then I think the other ones that we're a bit more familiar with is kind of plant-based and kind of alt protein. And I'm sort of mashing together vegan here with other kind of meat substitutes and other protein foods. I think you could make a case for adding, if you like, kind of lab-grown meats and other new protein sources in this bucket, but I shan't today. So really, that's about sustainability is where this came from, but it's also addressing a very important question of kind of how we feed the planet in that sense. So I think meat substitutes are in there. There's a big fundraise this week concluded in the mycelium space, so the mushroom space. Obviously, we've had kind of corn in that space and a sort of fermented mushroom space before, but there's other proteins out there that are really interesting. They're not necessarily here now, but soon they will be giving rice protein, soy protein a run for their money. So there's a lot of really interesting things in this space, and obviously we've had, if you like, a big bull run on vegan foods, a correction, and then likely to be an uptick again. And obviously in the wings are insects and larvae and these other sort of primary protein categories. However, at the moment, they're really limited to feeding the animals that we eat, but they are but one step removed from our food chain, if you like. Health and wellness. I mean, we know this, that consumers are more health conscious. So how that's manifesting is fermentable foods, functional foods, natural ingredients, clearly a focus on the big macros of salt, sugar and fat. And really what I see as the poster child really of all of this is the gut biome. So, you know, postbiotics, prebiotics, very much of the moment, being able to get a platform of soft drinks like your kombuchas, and in the dairy space, sort of kefirs, and in the water-based space as well. So many things there as well. Also people looking to stack those fermented products with antioxidants and minerals and vitamins. And then lastly, sort of sustainability, really. So again, people are looking into brands to reduce their footprints, support fair trade, promote animal welfare. Whatever the manifestation of that, I think it's less about a particular certification, although there is a growing skepticism against greenwashing. So people are looking for solids and clear reasons to believe. So those certifications, I feel, are coming back into fashion. But that transparency and just being real and substantiating those claims in that space is really important. And if we look at, where we go from there, how we sort of take those global trends and the so what's effectively, I think you've got to realize as well that temperatures are rising across the planet, and it's not just a theoretical construct, it's going to have some consequences on the food and drink supply chain, right? So there's a role for companies to deliver against that temperature rise in terms of mainstream customers, and also those with special diets, the very young and the very old. So from sort of pediatric to geriatric care, there's a need to, can we help people cope with these increasingly volatile temperatures that get increasingly colder and increasingly warmer at the same time in any given year as well? So that starts to stretch, if you like, what we need to do. Now, there's also kind of enhancing performance as well. So a big focus from people about how can I up my A game in cognition? So you've seen the growth of nootropics really talk to that, and stacks. And also, adaptogens, so a sort of effectively something that can help get balance within the system, be it balance of hormones or balance of mind between, if you like, kind of arousal and sedation. It can take people from, if people are sort of at one level, they can equal them out. So this is really interesting, and these terms are being not thrown around just at conferences these days. They're being manifest on packs, back of pack, front of pack, and there's a lively if you like, kind of performance-orientated podcasts and YouTube and media that people are consuming, not just the fashionistas of the food and drink industry, but the early majority is starting to get on board. I think the other thing as well is kind of, and I've been a big fan of this for years, messaging made simple. Food can often make itself more complicated than it needs to be. But that language around health claims, because obviously it's a regulated area, so many messages front of pack. It's a hugely shouty environment, the modern shop. So I think to go against that, we're seeing a trend to brands being more minimalist. really laser focused about their points of difference or point of difference. And that sort of pared back approach is very refreshing. And we're seeing some really good cut through with brands doing that. So if we now jump from, if you like, the global level to the UK, I think the big one for me is permissible indulgence. It's been around for a while. But look at the data. I mean, even in the current cost of living crisis, with all the focus on sort of health and all these meta trends said, good old confectionery is still growing 14% year on year. And people are now saying they're snacking more in many cases than they were during the pandemic. So it's like, we like to snack, we find comfort, we find succor, we find pleasure, we find enjoyment, whether it's ourselves or with others, from indulgence. And then I think if you ask people what a sort of affordable luxury is, and you give them the whole gamut that they can, it can be anything, at top of the list tends to be food and drink, right? So steak and champagne and fish and chocolate and wine. These are all things that people define. And then nearly half of adults say, well, it's actually easier to justify it than it was when I was sort of stuck at home during a sort of lockdown, really. So, and over half people say, well, look, if I just want to feel better, eating an old school chocolate bar is a way to do that as well. So I think there's some really interesting things there as well. And then I think if we go into the, one of the hottest parts of UK at the moment is kind of protein and kind of gut health remain those key trends. But and this narrative around UPFs, ultra processed foods, really interesting, because if you like, that's starting to hit through, over half of shoppers are looking for, a boost to their health, and a quarter saying they're more than they were dialed into the health category. So if you look at sort of protein, UPFs and gut health, they are really starting to get some traction, and you're seeing brands shape that around those messaging, shaping their value propositions, shaping their pitches, defining themselves against UPFs, defining themselves against an entire category sometimes, and saying, look, I don't do this. I'm purer, simpler. I don't play this game. And they want to put blue water between themselves and other competitors that they can paint as UPFs as well. So, look, the book on UPFs has changed the debate, whether you think it's fair or not. Clearly there is this narrative that says, look, it's less about the macro, so less about consumption of sugar per se, it's the source of that sugar, less about fat than the source of that fat, and UPFs. And there appears to be some biology in that. There appears to be some traction in that. And of course, you have brands saying, well, look, I'm a UPF because I've been processed and this part is processed, but look at this that I do. I do this really well because I do that. Which is also true. So I think there's a simplicity to that UPF narrative that's very seductive and very easy. And life in food and drink is more complicated than that. But in a way that doesn't matter, because the shopper out there is having that told to them quite a lot. And then gut health, we talk about, there's gut health appears to be one of these areas where there's very little trade-off. Hardly anybody can say that there's any downside to that. People intuitively feel that gut health is the right thing to do, have done for decades, and now we're getting the data increasingly come back of that link between, if you like, the brain and the gut, and it can affect everything from kind of sports performance, cognition, to kind of mood, and indeed, some of those things are being prescribed to, against the depression. So it's a medicalized phenomenon as well. So. I think the other piece is kind of plant-based. If you had this webinar, 12 months ago, we'd have been talking about, is this peak plant-based and is it going to go any further from here? I think it's fair to say that some of the air in the balloon of plant-based has come out. In terms of how it's gone, I think there's been a reaction. I think cost of living's played into that. I think retailers have overranged as well, which has stretched the sales over a lot of SKUs. And I also think there's a little bit of a rethinking by shoppers as well about why they're getting into plant-based. What do I think, though? I think this is a pause for breath. I think the market will come back. And I think those propositions that come back will be, if you like, in better shape, and they'll be more more able to kind of get sticky NPD as well. So I think, look, plant-based is taking a temporary step back, but I do think it gets to come back over the fullness of time, and it gets to normalize and become another category over time as well. We've seen that time and time again in food and drink. So if we look at shopping habits, all the predictions are that inflation will slow. However, the Red Sea crisis, I think, may well put some of that on pause. We've yet to see how that will play out. But particularly in fresh goods, I think you could see another round of inflation. So I think you could see certain fresh goods having CPIs and heading up, whilst other parts head down. And of course, what we don't know is the read across to utilities and energy costs, which again might get CPIs back in fashion again. So I think it's a mixed picture on inflation. I think, consumers are diving into loyalty schemes. You're seeing the Co-op, for instance, reformat their scheme. Most retailers are having a look at loyalty and what does loyalty mean and how can I reward my core shopper? That's a really interesting dynamic. Discounters continue to roar away. I mean, you've got nearly 20% of the market, soon to be, I'm sure, a quarter of the market in the UK being discount orientated. So really interesting. And then you're seeing this big sort of trade across from brand to own label, and then within own label from sort of posh own label, if you like, to more entry level. So you're seeing that move. And as the economy unwinds and growth comes back, I see that will unwind again. People will trade up within own label and trade across back to the brands, just like we've seen before. So I think, look, some of these trends are easier to call than others. That's one of the slightly more easier ones. It's also worth talking about, HFSS. We clearly have an election in the UK. Clearly, there's going to be some changes to that, and I wouldn't attempt to predict that. But I think, you have got those retail location restrictions at the moment, whereabouts in store. It catches a lot of brands in there. You're talking about 15% of total goods and services. And then, if you like, those promotional, bans, if you like, on certain promo mechanics, certain ways of talking and marketing are yet to come. I would expect, I think it's fair enough to say that if we accelerate, into a different political setup post-election, it's likely that this will accelerate. So brands that have wrapped their heads around it, salt reduction, sugar reduction, lactose splitting, I think will be better placed than those that don't. So I would continue to have this, in your in tray would be my advice. And then I think, consumers want to buy sustainably. But they don't want to pay for it. I mean, this is the age-old discussion. All the data in the world saying, yes, it's important to me, and yes, I'll do that. But will I actually shell out another 10pence? Will I change brands for that? Well, some will and some won't. So I think what that means for you and your brand is just to consider how you talk about sustainability. Make sure there's some solid reasons to believe in your packaging, your process. On the continent and more broadly, we now have scope 3. So that means we now need a duty of care to think about who we buy from and who we sell to. So if you like, the firms are being asked to take a view of the whole value chain rather than that bit, your factory, the bit you control. So scopes 3 coming. And I think shoppers are, as I said earlier, a little bit, more, skeptical about claims because they've just been proved, wrong when they've assumed that certain claims are going to be true or not. So again, if you do claim, give it a solid, give it a reason to believe and make it understandable, because it is important to a lot of people generally, and to a smaller subset, it is very important. So history will belong to those on the side of the angels, but very, very slowly. And that has been the case in food and drink for a long time now.
Thank you, Hamish. Apologies for having to move the screen, technical things. So I think now what we can do is I will stop share and we'll hand over to you, Kelly.
Thank you very much. Now let me share my screen. Sorry, bear with me. Go into full screen mode. I'm not surprised to hear snacking has gone up. I know it has for me, and I don't think I can blame that on COVID, but happy to hear I'm not on my own. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hamish, brilliant. Excellent. Okay, brilliant. So that was super insightful. Thank you so much, Hamish, for sharing that with us. My part of this presentation is now we know the trends, we know where we're going in the future. How can we take this really valuable insight and knowledge and feed this into our brand and communicate effectively and efficiently? So what I'm going to walk you through now are my 5 top tips to maintaining red hot relevance. And I'm going to walk you through that step by step. So a little bit of context. I'm Kelly. I'm the founder and the creative director of White Bear. We obviously specialize in working with food and drink brands in the challenger sector, which is really everybody unless you are number one. So we love working with those challenger brands. We also love working with tired brands who need to maintain relevance. Perhaps their audience it isn't what it used to be. How can we make you relevant again? So that's something we're really passionate about. All of our thought process is built around the idea of the white bear phenomenon. And I'm going to explain this. Well, I might not need to explain it. Many of you might know it. But I'm going to tell you this quick story so you can understand our thinking and the process that we go through when we create brands. So there's this American psychologist called Daniel Wegner, and he had a theory that if you were asked not to think about something, all you could do was think about that one thing. He was a professor at Harvard, and with all of his subjects, he asked them, don't think about a white bear. What he found was that his volunteers could not go more than 20 seconds without thinking about that white bear once that seed had been planted. So with all of the brands that we create white bears for them. That one thing that has stick, that is memorable, and that you can't forget. And with I guess the premise of this talk, it's all going to be built around what is relevant with your brand that we can build a white bear idea around. What do you need in order to do that? Well, first, you need to work with Hamish and Roz. You need to understand the data. You need to do your research. You need to understand your audience. What we find time and time again when working with businesses is that they base their pen portraits on assumptions, really. And assumptions, it's the enemy, really. We want to base our audience pen portraits on actual data. And demographics aren't just enough. Demographics often put brands in polarizing positions: older versus younger, male versus female, wealthy versus budgeting. It's obviously important to understand, but what we really care about when building brands that have cut through is psychographic profiling. So the behaviors of your audience. What do they care about? What are their need states? How do they behave? And that really taps into understanding those trends as we move into the future. How much they value personalization, how much they care about their health and their well-being, how much they want to know about a brand, and are you being authentic or are you talking BS? All of these things are really important, how much they value convenience, etc. So you really need to understand all of this before you start building your campaigns, your communication, your brand from the inside out. We worked with Beverage, which is a new breed of coffee, which is just launched in January. We've been working with them right from the very beginning. And to give you an idea of the journey that we went on, it was about understanding the audience, understanding that these people, they're probably city livers, they are probably are young professionals. They want to elevate their performance. They really care about their well-being, and what they want is something that's going to amplify their health and their wellness. But the insight is that we often forget to take those vitamins that are so important, but we will never forget that first coffee in the morning. That's built into our routine. That's part of our ritual. So in terms of a proposition for BevAS, it was around, you might forget your coffee, you might forget your vitamins, but you will never forget your coffee. So building this Coffee Plus brand in the coffee category, that helped build our proposition, our positioning, our brand, and our campaign around this idea of an elevated you. So every touch point from, for example, the characters that we created, they project this idea of you, but better. Oh, I want to focus. I want to be like an elephant who never forgets. I want to have better digestion. A little known fact, a giraffe has the best digestion of all animals on the planet. So we have a giraffe. So tapping into all of these touch points to really understand your audience. Also knowing that sustainability is really important to our audiences and our target audience for BevAS. So our pack had to be fully recyclable. There's no fancy foils on there that limits us from doing that, etc. So bringing all of that into consideration. Huel, another great example of a brand that understands its audience. These people value convenience. They value function over taste. So packaging is very functional. It's quite utility. It's black and white. It's not, they've moved towards doing some appetite appealing type stuff when we look at their noodles, etc. But their brand essentially is black and white Helvetica. It's function. It delivers something that the audience want to get quickly, conveniently, and they understand that audience need state, so much so that they've actually built a range of merch for the hooligans who want to wear the t-shirts and have the protein shakes walking down the street, so that they can meet like-minded people who know we had the same set of values. We value fairness, we value high protein, etc., etc. Really comes from a deep insight into their audience. Gorillas, another challenger brand at the minute, taps into understanding the urban dwellers' demand for groceries at speed. They built a campaign based off the data of the demand for certain products, but they did it in a provocative, irreverent way that speaks to this young urban audience. You should watch the ad. It's really clever, and ending on a really great insight that the biggest thing that is ordered by gorillas is bananas. So really playful ad that's truly based off the need states of their audience. So first off, know your audience inside and out, not just the demographics, but the psychographics. Then once we know this, build this into your narrative from the get-go and live and breathe this. We obviously can't sell anything if we can't tell anything. So how do we wrap this proposition statement up in a compelling story that is going to engage? We know that people resonate more with emotion. They base decisions over emotion over the rational. So how do we make sure that we're tapping into this? Another trend is the alt milk sector. And we all know Oatly. Oatly came in and said, right, we're going to take on the dairy industry. We're going to make milk made for humans. We're going to try and pull people from buying dairy to buying plant-based. Obviously a huge trend. Their tone of voice was very down to earth and very straightforward. They're super challenger, maverick in the sector. However, falling down more recently on the authenticity bit as they get investment from, I think it was Blackstone, who actually support deforestation. So going in hard hitting and really relevant, but then falling a little bit later on the authenticity side, as people start to unpick. There's been some scandals around ageism, etc. And actually, Oatly have launched a great site called Fuck Oatly for people who hate Oatly, where they've actually acknowledged these PR scandals head on and they've brought their point of view to the front. So a really interesting brand who's doing really relevant things. And then in comes Minor Figures, who goes, we don't care about being the hero. We're not the maverick. We don't want to take dairy drinkers and convert them into plant-based. What we want to do is make the best plant-based milk. We want to make the barista milk for the best tasting coffee. We want to celebrate the minor moments. We're not the hero. We're celebrating the best coffee with the newspaper. So they took this positioning and put themselves nearly in a way up against Oatly and are growing market share in the alt section. So brands that aren't evolving are more likely candidates for delisting. If you can only have two and there's older brands that are just sitting there and aren't moving with the times, you're going to choose a brand that offers something different instead. So are you a tired brand searching for relevancy? If so, this talk is really for you. Look at those trends. How can you bring them into your brand and in an authentic way? We don't want greenwashing, etc. But how can you build authentic stories that are relevant to an audience today? Tony's Chocolate Only, a great example of a brand that has the purpose at the core of every touch point of what they do. Even their bar is in the mold to represent the inequality of labor and unfair pay in the chocolate industry. And they get calls and complaints from parents saying, I can't split this bar in half to share with my kids, they're killing me. And they're like, well, that's an opportunity to tell a story about the inequality. So building this story, the story that people care about into every touch point, right down to the mold of their chocolate bar. So it's not just about saying we're plant-based. It's not about a front of pack covered in claims. People are just, they don't take that in. It's about how do you build that in a meaningful way at every touch point of your brand. So once you know that narrative and then you know how to talk to your audience, it's about being distinctive in how that you do that. And as the HFSS policies come in, a lot of brands don't have either the liberty of reformulating, or now they don't have the liberty of going on offer and that race to the bottom. So we need to build brand awareness through being distinctive, being front of mind, because we know the brands that get remembered are the ones that get bought the most. So building distinctive assets into your brand is absolutely critical, because we want to tap into the mental availability of our audience so that they remember you when they want to buy. Isle of Wight tomatoes, I think, are a really good example this year of a rebrand. They were originally called the Tomato Stall, and they were rebranded this year to really bring more provenance into their proposition. I mean, we all know, I think tomato sauce is quite a commodity product. It can be often bought on the cheapest is the best. So they noticed their point of difference is these tomatoes are grown in the Isle of Wight. They get more sunlight in the Isle of Wight than anywhere else in the UK. They get a different type of soil as well. So this tells a beautiful provenance story that gives us as a tomato brand a point of difference. So they renamed themselves the Isle of Wight tomatoes, which is a really lovely way of bringing provenance in when we know that people want to know more about authenticity and transparency. And that's a lovely way of doing that. Heinz, again, one of our cornerstones of distinctive brands, using their tombstone consistently across pack allows that instant recognizability, that's a word, and shelf shout when going to look for a product. And then owning a colour, again, it can be difficult to own a colour in general, but to own a colour in your sector isn't that difficult. I mean, we all know dairy milk's purple, they have trademarked that. And look at your sector and understand the colour coding, the semiotics of colours as well, and what those colours mean, how they make people feel, and how can you disrupt and be more memorable by using colour in order to stand out in your category. After building the distinctiveness into those brand assets, I often describe that as your brand is your castle, or your business is your castle, and your brand is the moat around your castle. It's the defensibility that prevents you from getting overshadowed by a competitor. So what are those defensible assets that you have? When you have those, then communication. And Hamish talked to the importance of simplicity on packaging. We're all just saturated with buzzwords and vegan this, vegetarian that, low in sugar this, gluten-free, etc. It's a sea of it, and a lot of brands use too much of it on the front. So they forget about their core brand building. They forget about what is our core message that we want to land, and they get into this competition. If I must say this because they're doing that, I can have all of these claims. Let's put them all on pack. Therefore, we must be doing everything right. And actually, nothing's going to cut through. It's that example I think Steve Jobs used where someone pitched an ad for Apple, and he asked one of his designers to stand up, and he threw a load of pieces of paper at them and they couldn't catch them all. And then he threw one and they got it. And it's like, that's the same with communication. What is the one idea? What is that one reasons to believe, that proposition that we want to get cut through with? I have a few examples in here for this. I think Branston Pickle is a great example of a brand that stayed relevant over 100 years. Packaging still staying quite traditional, but it very much recognized that its audience were aging. And how do we tap into a broader audience in a meaningful way? So they created this brilliant tone of voice and campaign assets around tapping into the nostalgia of Branston Pickle. So a dollop of childhood between two pieces of bread. So just tapping into that warm, fuzzy taste of home in a relevant way, or positioning them as the OG in the condiment aisle. So using a relevant tone of voice to a younger audience, but also very much establishing them as the first in the category. And then again, it's like, what do we want to be known for? We worked on this Kopparberg campaign, and again, an observation. There was two interesting things about this. One was that it was to date, all the all the British campaigns were just rolled out in Ireland. At the time, the campaign that they were running with was "The Outside Is Ours." And this was flowers in your hair, off to Glastonbury. That fell flat in its face in Ireland, because in Ireland, the outside's not ours. It's pissing rain most of the year. It's actually really annoying to see an ad like that. It wasn't resonating. So when we did our research, the observation was, well, firstly, we need a localized national Irish campaign. Secondly, people actually don't know that Kopparberg's Swedish. That's something we really want to talk about. So we built this campaign around the Swedish taste that translates, to build awareness around the provenance of Kopparberg. And then also the observation being that Swedes and Irish people have a great sense of humor. We love the crack. So we built this campaign around being Swede-ish, because Irish people are quite ishy. They'll say, oh, I'll meet you for a drink at 8, and they'll show up at 9:30. Swede-ish. So we built a whole dictionary around this Irish language and tone of voice that relates to the Swedish origins of Kopparberg. Another example here in terms of communications is the key point of difference with Tom Parker when we rebranded them and repositioned them was that they were actually the only free-range milk in the category. Their cows roam 180 days a year out in their fields, and they weren't talking about it. They were talking about Tom Parker, the person who used to deliver milk door to door nearly 100 years ago. He's not around anymore. The business is far more future focused than it used to be. And how do we set them up for success? Well, we tell the story of their free-range milk, of happy cows make happy milk, and built a whole manifesto around how these cows are treated that very much directed them internally as they grew with farms, but then also gave them a clear point of difference, again, in a commodity sector where it's a race to the bottom for a milk product. Lastly, we know our audience inside and out. We know how they behave and how they think. We know our proposition and how we tell that in a story that is relevant to them. We've then built a brand that they're not going to forget because it's so distinctive. It has a white bear. After that, we know our communications, our key points of difference, and that we want to tell. Well, then how does that get to the tactical? How do we create packaging that really cuts through? And while the medium is the message, robbed that from Marshall McLuhan, but the medium is the message in how we do this and how we practice what we preach. So consumers often associate specific visual design features with certain properties of food and drink products, such as taste and flavor and healthfulness, which I actually didn't know was a word until I did some research. I would say healthiness. But how do we understand the semiotics of packaging and make sure that we're using the right codes to speak the right message to the right people. Tom Parker, another, again, I've spoken about them earlier on, but they really wanted to talk sustainability. So we kept them in their glass bottles. We had a model where they could be returned, where they're fully recyclable. We moved from plastic labels to paper labels to make sure that every touch point really talked to their values, sustainability being one of them, and that we weren't just greenwashing. So think about the medium of your packaging and make sure that it rings true to what you're saying and what you value. And we do know that our customers value authenticity, and sustainability is another key thing. I think as well, something that I've noticed that there's definitely room for improvement is D2C packaging. I've noticed that the beauty sector actually doing that really well. However, D2C food and drink, there's a long way to go. So again, thinking about how can we communicate at every touch point of our brand, our story, our point of difference, and what we believe in, and using our D2C packaging is actually a really good way of doing that, making sure every surface is used to tell our story. I think the CEO of Oatly, I can't remember his quote, but he talks to it being free marketing. That box is free marketing for you. Treat it as an ad rather than just a mode of transport. And think about as well, sustainability being super important to your customers. Don't put extra flyers in there. Don't put unnecessary extra pieces of paper. Be really smart in terms of the packaging that you use. Maybe put a QR code on there that takes you to a website or a video. Maybe print on your box. Just try to practice what you preach. So in light of these trends, what should we consider when creating new packaging? So I've touched on most of these, but authenticity and transparency are really important. How do you tell your story in a way that's not just written? Is it the mold of your chocolate bar? Is it the format of your packaging? How do you make sure that it's translated through every touch point? Convenience, again, I think about the format of people on the go. I always think a brilliant example was when Pip and Nut moved from peanut butter in a tub to peanut butter in a sachet, because they understood the audience, these runners who wanted high protein on the go. But you're not going to take a tub of peanut butter, a spoon, and put them in your I was going to say in your fanny pack, Americans say, in your whatever that thing is you put around your waist when you go out for a run. So think about the format. Again, personalization is really important to our customers. So take every opportunity we can to make them feel heard and make them feel like you're speaking directly to them. Nutrition and wellness, consider the semiotics of packaging. If you are low sugar, or if you are, I'm trying to think now, I don't know, healthy, and you want to talk about wellness, make sure your packaging doesn't feel neon. It's not really plastic, because all of those give the cues for synthetic, science lab made, etc. So make sure that you understand the cues that you're giving to your customer when it comes to every touch point of your brand. And lastly, sustainability. No excess packaging, no foils can't be recycled. Understand every touch point of that pack and make sure that it is true to your values of sustainability is one of those. So just to recap on those 5 tips, know your audience inside and out, not just the demographics. Know the proposition and the narrative, how to tell the story, build those distinctive assets that underpin that point of difference. When it comes to communication, simplicity is key. Know that key message and how to use it and when to use it. And lastly, when it gets to the packaging and you want shout on pack, make sure you understand the hierarchy of your messaging and that you consider the medium and the message as well. So I don't know how I'm doing for time there, but that's me essentially. And we have 2 offers that I'm going to walk you through here now, and Roz or Hamish, feel free to interject if I've missed anything here. But first one we're offering is a consulting power hour. So one-on-one advice 3 winners. I'm going to say the first 3 that email us and oh no, that fill out the type form. I'm wrong. And what you're going to get there is 30 minutes, 30 with myself, 30 with Hamish. Hour, let's talk insights. Let's talk about how we can make actionable and tangible differences to your business and your brand in those sessions. And yeah, that's for the first 3 winners. So type form, Dave, I believe, is going to pop that in is the chat still disabled, Dave, or we put that in the Q&A?
It's in the chat. Everyone should be able to see it, and if not, there'll be an email going around shortly after with the link.
Great. Roz, Hamish, anything to add to that one?
That's good.
Yeah, great.
Great. And then the second one, Roz, I'm going to let you talk to this one.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
Hamish.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'll jump in quickly. So again, we just thought actually for the first 10 businesses who kind of messaged me, my email address is there at the bottom. We talked earlier about our consumer panel, the Taste Collective. So first few people to message me will give you 5 questions to ask our consumer panel. So anything you want to know about your product, your category, your competitors, just gain some insights which are going to help with all of that kind of building of your brand messaging. So again, just something for people to get involved with.
Great. So that's the end of my presentation. So shall I stop sharing and we could do some questions?
Yeah. Thank you both. That was fantastic. Hopefully the audience got some value from it, and in answer to 1 or 2 of the questions, the deck will be shared after the session. So that'll come out, and the recording also will be released in due course. We have a couple of quick questions. I'll cover probably the easiest or the quicker one. There's a question for Kelly. Kelly, do you have any workshops on branding? So if you want to take that, and then I have one for Hamish we'll go to afterwards.
Yes, I do, anonymous attendee. Yes, we do a lot of workshops on branding. So I am thinking we should follow up with that in our newsletter, Dave.
Yeah, sure.
That's going to.
Or,
so let me send on the recording.
Yeah,
well,
if anonymous attendee wants to drop us a note, we can pick it up as well. It's probably better. Kelly at White Bear or Dave at whitebearstudio.com.
Yes, I do a lot of those workshops and mentoring, so we'd love you to have you at one of those sessions.
And then Anne B, Hamish, has a question for you about inflation versus health and wellness. And if consumers are trading down and shopping at more discounters, how then do health and wellness products, which are more expensive, fare? So that's from Anne B.
Yeah, great question. I'm skeptical about these products, and I have to say I think sometimes there's supply chain issues with them. I mean, I wouldn't buy anything off Amazon, for instance, because I'm not sure necessarily what it says on the pack is what you get. Often you get a little bit of what they've last been making into capsules, and a lot of what you want to get. So I think price is an arbiter of quality. I think channel is an arbiter of quality as well. Not to say that the more expensive something is, the more efficacious it is. But as a general principle, a bit like in wine, for instance, it's more logical that a £10 bottle of wine would probably taste better than a £5, irrespective of the excise and the tax effect on that. And as we get the cost inflation coming through, I think you've got a couple of things playing out in health and wellness. You've got different formats. So you're seeing a lot of companies come out of the traditional sort of medicine jar with the screw cap in the kind of brown glass into kind of pouch, because obviously the cogs on a pouch is about 30% of what a glass jar is, plus you don't have the smash risk, plus it's more ergonomic, plus it's easier to send through the post. So you're kind of getting some format innovation. You're seeing more of a drift towards kind of whole powder, vitamins, nootropics, minerals, etc., where the consumer at home is then needs a spoon. You can buy these spoons that's 5 micrograms, 10 micrograms, etc. And if you need 10 mg of boron, well, it's just almost like a tiny spoon's worth, and you put it on your cereals, because obviously powders is cheaper than encapsulation. Encapsulation is a very labor-intensive purpose, takes a long time to do, prone to error. Sometimes there's a tiny amount of the active and a huge capsule. Some of these capsules are difficult to swallow. So again, I think there's innovation in the format, down to what's all kind of pouches, and then secondly to powders. Plus, I would encourage you to be skeptical of what's in it, and if you are a brand, evidence it. Show your CIA, show your provenance, show your certifications. Differentiate through your supply chain muscle with the shopper, because they're rightly skeptical, and there's a lot of snake oil in that general category.
Thanks, Hamish. Oh, sorry, Roz, over to you. I think that a few new questions have actually gone in the chat,
Yes,
in the Q&A.
So Kelly,
over to you.
Yeah, this one is for you, and this could be a challenge to answer in but 1 or 2 minutes. But the question is, how can you stay relevant and contemporary as a brand without always having to update?
That's a really good question. Yes, that's a really good question, because none of us want to fall into the trap of just being trendy for trendy's sake. And you very much will get found out if you are just trying to tap into trends for the sake. I think what brands need to do is to start on the inside out. What am I about? What do I believe in? And how can I authentically then, as a brand, communicate that to a relevant audience? And I think it's that whole, there's a gap in the market, but is there a market in the gap? So obviously you don't want to be creating a brand that people aren't interested in, or a product that people aren't going to buy. So I'm assuming that the brand that you're building needs to tap into some of these trends that are ongoing for not just a year at a time, but very much think about how can you come at it from a brand in an authentic way that is for longevity, not just for a meme that's going to go viral. It has to be something like, for example, with Tony's Chocolonely being a purposeful brand that's built around a mission. That's not going to change year to year. However, that is something that people care about at the moment. If that answers the question.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And another one has just come in, which I think is another really interesting question. How important are founder stories, founder personal brands, and how does that fit?
Yeah, let me dive into that one.
I'm going to put you over. Sorry, we have.
I mean, one of my favorite coffee brands was Jimmy's, right? He was everywhere. Jimmy was the East End kind of coffee aficionado, ran the business with his sister, made a very nice coffee, I felt. Obviously, that brand has now moved into Britvic. How do I feel about Jimmy, the guy? He did a lot of sort of personal advertising. Now it's part of a hugely successful, fantastic FMCG organization. Well, I like the brand a little bit less, really. And I'm a little bit skeptical that the brand values and what made Jimmy special will be carried through. And I sort of suspect in sort of 10, 15 years, Jimmy's will be another brand. And we probably can't remember why it was called Jimmy's and why Jimmy, it existed. And this is the natural evolution of things. But I think that founder's story gives lift and rocket fuel to a brand in the early years. But as you reach maturity, it starts to sort of peter out because other factors, USPs, your differentiators, your value propositions, your reasons to believe have got to do the heavy lifting. It can't be about one person and a wonderful backstory.
I think as well, just to build on that, two things. If you are a founder, how comfortable are you being in the spotlight over a long period of time? We're actually working with 2 brands where we're trying to work on building their legacy, because they're actually 80 and they've built both, 175, 180, and they've built these amazing brands that have gone through their lifetime. And now they're like, I don't really want to do this anymore. And the brand's values are built on me. So how do we build that legacy moving forward? So I think it's worth thinking about, if you want to maybe exit or you don't want to be the face, how capable are you of managing that when that transfer happens? Because just like Hamish said, you do kind of lose that warm and fuzzy when you hear them getting acquired. A bit like how I felt when, I guess, Coke bought Innocent. They had such I know that wasn't all about the founders, but their personality felt so down to earth that then and natural, and says what they do on the tin, that then when they got bought, you're a bit like, ooh, I don't know if they still represent what they originally believed in.
Great. Well, thank you, guys. I think we're out of time. Some really great questions there, and I think there's a few we didn't get around to. So anyone that wants to continue the discussion, please reach out to any of us. We'll send out some contact details afterwards, as well as the recording, the deck, the links for the competition. So look, hopefully you enjoyed it, and thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. And thank you to the two speakers, Kelly and Hamish.
Yeah, super. Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Cheers,
Thanks
guys.
a million.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.